What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy Football Over Analysis. Today we're talking about the New York Giants, their fantasy relevant players, and whether or not we are targeting or fading them in our drafts this summer. And before we get into the specific players on the Giants, I really want to spend some time talking about the offensive coordinator situation. Because the offensive coordinator and play caller can really make or break a team when it comes to their fantasy production. And the Giants really made an uninspiring hire for their offensive coordinator role, hiring Matt Nagy from the Chiefs. Nagy had been the Chiefs' offensive coordinator for each of the last 3 seasons, and while he wasn't officially fired after this past year, the Chiefs just simply made no effort to bring him back. Nagy's contract expired, and the Chiefs were more than happy to just let him pursue other opportunities. When Nagy took over as the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, he inherited an elite offense that had just finished first in the league in points per game and first in the league in total yards under Eric Bieniemy. Nagy immediately dropped that to the bottom half of the league. Immediately, the Chiefs under Matt Nagy go from first in points per game down to 15th and first in total yards down to 9th. Year 2 with Nagy in 2024, the Chiefs once again finish 15th in total points per game, and their yards per game drops from 9th to 16th. And then last season, the decline just continues. The Chiefs drop from 15th in points per game down to 21st, and from 16th in yards per game down to 20th. So in 3 years, the body of work from Matt Nagy in Kansas City was not good. He inherits a top 5 elite offense and immediately turns it into a bottom half offense. And then at the end of his contract, the Chiefs are happy to let him go without making any attempt to retain him. So the decision to hire Matt Nagy is a confusing one to me. At best, Nagy is a guy that I think runs a lot of stale concepts like what we saw in Kansas City the last few years. He's not a guy that seems to have solutions when the offense is struggling. So if I'm the Giants, I can't imagine that Matt Nagy was the best choice for this young team, for Jaxson Dart going into year 2. I just don't see how they believe that he's going to be the one that gets this offense to elevate and take the next step. So when you think about an offensive coordinator from a fantasy football perspective, you want your coordinator to be putting the players in a position to succeed, making things easier for them, and just setting things up for a high-scoring offense. And take a look around the league at the impact that some of the high-end offensive coordinator or head coaching hires, as the case may be, have had on some of these teams. Look at Ben Johnson in Chicago last year. Just look at the jump that Caleb Williams made from year 1 to year 2. Going from a coaching environment where he had Matt Eberflus, who didn't belong there, and a rotating door of offensive coordinators that they were constantly changing over the course of the season. Same thing in Jacksonville. A lot of people had written off Trevor Lawrence and labeled him as a bust after what he had struggled with in his first few years, but look at the coaching situations that he had. He gets Urban Meyer in his rookie year, Doug Peterson after that, who was running a really outdated, stale scheme, very similar to Matt Nagy, as a matter of fact. And then Liam Cohen shows up last year, and suddenly Lawrence, once he began to understand the system, starts to thrive and starts to hit his ceiling in the NFL. So given what Matt Nagy's body of work has been in the NFL, it's very hard for me to be excited about what he can do for the fantasy relevant players of the New York Giants. So automatically, before we even get into the player evaluations, just know that Nagy is going to be kind of a dark cloud that's looming over this whole thing and suppressing the values of these guys a little bit. And really, it's not just Nagy that's a concern on the Giants' offensive staff. They also have Brian Callahan, who was fired midway through the season last year as the Titans head coach after he struggled to make any kind of progress at all with Cam Ward. And there's also Greg Roman, who's bounced around the league in a lot of spots but hasn't had any consistent success as an offensive coordinator. And so between Nagy at offensive coordinator and then Callahan and Roman working under him, you've got these 3 uninspiring, stale offensive minds that are overseeing the development of Jaxson Dart, Malik Nabers, Cam Skattebo, and the other key members of this Giants offense going into this season. That's not something that makes me feel good for their fantasy outlooks this year. So getting on to the actual players now. At quarterback, Jaxson Dart finishes his rookie season as the QB 14. And a lot of Dart's value as a rookie came as a rusher. Dart running for just under 500 yards and also 9 touchdowns. While as a passer, Dart throws for just over 2,200 yards and only 15 touchdowns. Now, Dart really was a lot more impressive than what some of his numbers might suggest. The fact that he was able to do what he was able to do and make the Giants relevant week to week, despite really playing without much of anything at all at the wide receiver position. Malik Nabers goes down in Dart's first start, and so he goes the entirety of his season without what should have been his best target on paper. One of the problems with Dart, though, is that he does put himself in harm's way through his rushing. He exposed himself to a lot of big hits last year and came away with a couple of concussions. That's a major concern going into the second year. On the positive side of things, though, Dart does have some better weapons in the passing game to work with this year. Malik Nabers actually did get some positive reports going into training camp, and there's optimism that he could be available from week one. And the team also goes out and signs Isaiah Likely to be a major red zone threat. And the team also brings in Darnell Mooney, who is probably an upgrade over Darius Slayton as the team's primary deep threat. So I do think it's reasonable to expect Dart to produce some better numbers as a passer. However, I am concerned that the touchdown numbers through the rushing game could regress. And then you have the injury concern with Dart. I don't think he's going to change his play style much. I do think the Giants will try to coach certain things out of him, like trying to get him to slide or duck out of bounds when he can, rather than take a big hit for an extra yard or two. But they're not going to be able to completely coach the injury risk out of Jaxson Dart's game. So with Dart, you have to draft him as a QB1 this year. Mind you, a low-end one. He's coming in right now as QB11. And I don't really know what the ceiling for him is in an offense that I don't think is going to be very creative or innovative with Matt Nagy, with a wide receiver in Malik Nabers that's going to be playing at less than 100%, even if he starts the season from week one. And then you also have a guy that his floor is very dependent on his rushing, and if that rushing falls off at all, or if he takes himself out of play by getting injured through that aggressive rushing style that he has, then you're just drafting a QB1 here that carries too much risk for my liking. I'd rather just pass on Dart this year, take the safer guys like Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, take a shot on Mahomes or Bo Nix a little later, or even go later than that and go for the Baker Mayfield, Tyler Shuck tier. And I love what I saw from Jaxson Dart last season, but this all just comes down to the fact that I don't trust Matt Nagy and the Giants to put him in the best possible position to succeed for year two. So Dart is going to be a fade for me this year, and maybe he can overcome the less than desirable situation working with Matt Nagy, but until I see it, I'm just going to fade him and take the safer options. At running back, Cam Skattebo was well on his way to breaking out in his rookie season before a dislocated ankle landed him on injured reserve, cutting his season short. Skattebo took over the starting job from Tyrone Tracy in week 2 and held it through the injury in week 8, and during that time, Skattebo has over 600 total yards with 7 total touchdowns. Skattebo also was used quite a bit in the passing game as a checkdown option for Jaxson Dart. There were 3 games where Skattebo had 6 targets or more. The Giants have also said pretty openly this offseason that they want to be a run-first team. Jaxson Dart has talked about how the team plans to just feed Skattebo as much as they possibly can. So there's a lot of positives to like about Skattebo. The biggest negative is the serious injury that he's recovering from. Tony Pollard suffered a similar one a couple years back, and the year after he was not the same. But I think the effects of the injury are kind of baked into Skattebo's price right now. At the moment, he's going as the RB19. So it's really not a bad price tag for Skattebo, going in the back half of the RB2 ranks. There are some guys that are going a little later than him that I think are a little safer, such as David Montgomery or DeAndre Swift, but there's also comparable guys with similar floors and similar ceilings, such as Quinshon Judkins, Bashal Tutin, Travion Henderson, that also go in this range. I don't hate Skattebo where he's at. The best case that I can make for Skattebo is that I think he has better receiving potential than most of the guys going in this range. If he continues to average around 5 targets per game, then that's going to give him a really nice floor to help out with his ceiling. The only thing you're worried about at that point is the offensive environment and whether or not Matt Nagy is going to produce an offense that gives Skattebo an opportunity to hit that ceiling with goal line opportunities in the red zone. At wide receiver, Malik Nabers plays in just 4 games last season before going down with a torn ACL. Nabers, who before that finished as the wide receiver 6 during his rookie season, and the real shame of it was last year that we never got to see Nabers and Jaxson Dart play together. So we really have no idea what kind of chemistry the two have with one another. it's something that we're not going to find out, maybe not until much later in this season when Nabers gets closer to 100%. For most of the offseason, the sentiment around Malik Nabers and his injury recovery was not going well. We didn't hear a lot of positive updates from the Giants. We saw the one clip at the charity softball game where Nabers was struggling just to make it down to first base. So not a lot of people expected that Nabers would even be participating from day one of training camp. It seemed like we were trending towards him starting the season on the PUP, maybe not playing until at least week 4, if not later. Well, all of a sudden things have changed because as training camp has opened up for the Giants, not only has Nabers just avoided being on the PUP at all, but he's practicing in full right away, and it sounds like he's trending toward being available from the start of the season in week 1. And it's hard to say what this news is going to do for Nabers' ADP. As of this video, Nabers was ranked as the wide receiver 21, going in the range of Emeka Egbuka, Luther Burden, Devontae Adams, Terry McLaurin. And if he were to stay at that price point, I would be interested, but chances are this is going to rise over the next few weeks if we continue to get positive reports, and if Nabers suddenly goes from the back end of round 3, round 4, to creeping up into the second round of drafts, at that point, the cost is going to be a little too rich for me. So I'm a huge Nabers guy, and the news of him being ready to go from training camp is great, but I still have concerns about whether or not he's going to be actually anywhere close to 100% to start the year. So even if he's available from week 1, we don't know how the Giants are going to handle his snap share at the beginning. He could possibly only play around 50-60% of the snaps or something like that until we get later into the season. He starts to get ramped up a little more at that point. So with Nabers, especially if his ADP does creep up the further we get into August, I think there's too much risk relative to where you're going to have to draft him. So I'm going to be fading him in draft season. However, he's a guy that if he does start the season slow, I'd absolutely be trying to buy low on him because the Malik Nabers that you get in November or December at the end of the year could be a much different Malik Nabers than what you get in September and October. As for the rest of the receivers, there's not a lot of reasons to go after these guys. Darnell Mooney is okay. He was decent for the Falcons the last 2 years. If Nabers were to miss any time, then I think he might have some streaming appeal, but it's going to be tough to trust him week to week. Then beyond him, Malachi Fields is more of a dynasty play than a guy you need to be putting on the back of your bench in a redraft league. And then you have the retread veterans like Darius Slayton, Odell Beckham, Juju Smith-Schuster. We don't need to touch any of these guys. And then you have Isaiah Likely at the tight end position. Likely, who has familiarity with John Harbaugh from their time together in Baltimore. Harbaugh at one point said that he believed Likely possesses an all-pro skill set. And Likely is one of my favorite targets at the tight end position. He goes outside of the tight end 1 ranks, meaning he's a perfect late-round tight end guy. He's going to be tied to an exciting young quarterback in Jaxson Dart, and there's a good chance that he could be deployed as one of the team's primary red zone weapons. And given that he goes so late in drafts, he's also going at the point where I'm not as concerned about the Matt Nagy effect that I would be for some of the other primary guys in this offense. And the thing about Likely as a late-round tight end, even if he doesn't work out, then there's plenty of comparable guys that have similar floors and ceilings as him that you can pick up that will make up for him not working out. Because you could easily double-dip at this position with Likely and a guy like Chikakonkwo, or an A.J. Barner in Seattle if you prefer him, or you could go for a veteran guy like Mark Andrews, Dallas Goedert. It's the beauty of the late-round tight end strategy. And that's going to do it for this one, guys. So with the Giants, there's a lot of players that I like here, but I think that the Matt Nagy situation, the fact that they don't have a good, innovative play caller, could really hold them back and make them a lot more frustrating than people expect them to be. For Jaxson Dart and Malik Nabers, those guys are total fades for me going into the year. Cam Skattebo, I do have some interest as an RB2. And Isaiah Likely, given how late he goes in drafts, I love him as part of a late-round tight end build. But other than that, the primary pieces, again, the Darts, the Nabers, they're not going to be guys that I'm getting a lot of exposure to this year. But I thank you guys so much for watching, and we will talk to you next time when we go over the Dallas Cowboys.